Good afternoon, everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the session on the role of civil society in the multilateral system in the framework of WAAS at 60. And I'd like to add my congratulations to those that have already been expressed. My name is David CHIKVAIDZE. I have the honor of being a fellow of the Academy and the privilege of moderating this session. My day job is Chef de Cabinet of the Director General of the United Nations Office at Geneva. Civil society in all its forms plays a critical role in driving social change. This is not a new phenomenon. Indeed, as far back as the Congress of Vienna 206 years ago, in addition to the more than 200 states and princely houses, there were representatives of cities, corporations, religious organizations, special interest groups, and many others that in today's parlance we would identify as civil society. And yet 2 centuries and many key moments in history later, including the signing of the United Nations Charter, where civil society played key roles. And despite practically universal agreement that solving 21st century challenges is unthinkable without the engagement of civil society writ large, we still find it necessary today to debate the obstacles and ways of enhancing its participation in multilateralism. The United Nations system and other multilateral institutions, for their part, rely on civil society. Moreover, even derive much of their legitimacy from engaging meaningfully with the public. Civil society organizations frequently act as multipliers of the work of international organizations. Yet governments who, let's face it, largely run the show, have very different approaches to civil society, depending on the substantive area, the government, and the civil society organization. These approaches run the gamut from enlisting the voice and force of civil society to ignoring them, or worse yet, vilifying and prosecuting them. Our panel discussion today has as its point of departure the notion that there is still much left to do to break down the barriers that separate we the peoples from international decision-making. As we see from the annotation in the program of this conference, the questions proposed to unpack the issue are probing and to the point. I would suggest that we put an additional baseline question to the above notion. Are there indeed barriers? And if there are, of what type? Institutional, psychological, ideological, practical? Answering these questions may help us come up with recommendations that we hope will go beyond mere exhortations and declarations. Given the relatively large number of panel members and your exceptional quality in individual and aggregate knowledge and experience, which we dearly want to tap into as much as possible, and in the mere hour that we have for this panel, I will ask each of you to please keep your opening remarks to 3 minutes. This should allow us to have a second round of brief remarks by each to add or to react to others' comments. And for me, if need be, to cross-question and stimulate a discussion. I know it's a tall order, but with your cooperation and my strict timekeeping, we may actually pull this off. Fair warning, I intend to be very strict and have no qualms to ask speakers to keep to the allotted time. And I have a merciless stopwatch running right here, which tells me that I've already been speaking for 3 minutes and 54 seconds. With that, let me start by introducing the first speaker, Liberato Bautista, is president of CoNGO, the Conference of Non-Governmental Organizations and Consultative Status with the UN. He also serves as the representative of the United Methodist Church in Geneva. It is my pleasure to ask you to start off given your role in the various intergovernmental processes that take place at UNOG. Please, you have the screen, not the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. CHIKVAIDZE, and thank you, Gary, and the World Academy of Art and Science for inviting me again to an event that is of prime importance. Tall order indeed for 2 minutes. Let me try. CoNGO was founded in 1948. We are an international NGO in general consultative status with the UN. We had a little over 500 NGOs with either a consultative, associated, or observer status, each of them having a mandate as varied as all the issues covered under the sun. We have CoNGO and its members share in the belief that NGOs have a major and crucial contribution to make to the policy discussions and decisions of the UN system. The breadth and depth of grassroots experience and professional competence are crucial and indispensable in intergovernmental processes, and when brought to the intergovernmental table, make for better outcomes of multilateral negotiations. There is no declaration, convention, treaty, or UN resolution today that did not have a social civil society input. Number two, without engaging the participation, expertise, and competence of we the peoples, the multilateral system would be greatly impoverished as to imperil what must be a robust, inclusive, and participatory multilateral system. Article 71 of the UN Charter and ECOSOC Resolution 1996/31 underscores the role of NGOs and the importance of their access to UN premises and meetings. Nothing at this time should be devised as to diminish the gains from Resolution 1996/31. Access must be enhanced because it is the lifeblood of UN NGO relations. Lastly, the intersecting crises and pandemics we face today require a planetary response, and organizing and mobilizing that are at once local and global in substance and transborder and transnational in expanse. Civil society members must be ensured the ability to assert their voice and exercise their agency in a multilateral setting that is robust, inclusive, responsive, and relevant. We must forge multilateral solidarity, which in the words of Barbara Adams of Global Policy Forum entails bending the arc of governance back again from viewing people no longer just as shareholders, no longer just as stakeholders, but rights holders, where the member states are the duty bearers. We must develop a rights-based multilateralism so that the United Nations is a standard bearer rather than a neutral convener of public and private engagements. I hope, David, that can start off some conversation.
That is brilliant. Thank you so much. And you did this as close to 3 minutes as humanly possible. And thank you very much for your very baseline approach and setting the conversation and for your global perspective. Thank you. And move to Mr. Andreas BUMMEL, co-founder and director of the NGO Democracy Without Borders, which advocates strongly for the democratization of the United Nations and other international organizations. You are in good company, sir. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. As you said, my organization, Democracy Without Borders, is promoting better democratic representation and participation of people in the United Nations and the system of global governance. And of course, the inclusion of civil society is part of this mandate. Many member states are suppressing civil society at home, and they do not want civil society groups to have any meaningful role to play at the UN. It is exactly for this reason that those countries seek membership and often leadership in relevant bodies. Those member states that have a different view and who in fact wish to work with civil society need to strengthen their efforts and to coordinate much better. Those should become members and more active in the ECOSOC NGO committee as well as the Human Rights Council to push back against a restriction of civil society spaces at the UN that has been taking place for a couple of years, if not longer. Further, ECOSOC should only elect candidates as members of the Committee on NGOs that have a positive track record in terms of ensuring an enabling environment for civil society. The same, of course, applies to the Human Rights Council, as we all know. When establishing the Council back in 2006, member states themselves in the General Assembly decided in Resolution 60/251 that with membership on the Council comes a responsibility to uphold human rights standards. But what's happening, and we know that all, is quite the opposite in many cases. Better coordination in this regard, dealing with this issue should be high on the agenda of democratic UN member states. Currently, there is a new debate about a possible group of democracies, and I believe that a strong UN democracy caucus is needed that coordinates value-based action in UN bodies. So a lot needs to be done at the level of member states. Nonetheless, the single most important proposal at this time, in my opinion, is the creation of the role of a UN civil society envoy inside the UN Secretariat, which is promoted amongst others by the Together First campaign. In a recent report, they pointed out that this new role would increase the UN's limited capacity to engage proactively with civil society. And this envoy would look into how processes for civil society engagement could be improved and identify best practices, inconsistencies, and roadblocks. Another recent proposal that I don't want to miss to mention right now is also endorsed by many civil society groups, and that's the instrument of a UN World Citizens Initiative that would allow people to put proposals on the UN's agenda if they mobilize sufficient support across world regions. I think it would be fantastic if this panel would like to discuss more the problem of member states, the proposal of a UN civil society envoy, and a World Citizens Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is not only succinct, but extremely rich with ideas presentation, and I thank you very much for it. I don't want to enter into a discussion now. Let's go to a first round. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Ms. Maria Fernanda Espinosa, who is a very prominent representative of a very engaged member state, who is among the few ambassadors who's been permanent representative in Geneva and in New York, and president of a session of the General Assembly, the 73rd session, and who has made making the UN relevant for all her signature slogan during her presidency. Excellency, it's wonderful to see you again, albeit on the screen, and the screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Let me start by saying congratulations to WAAS for its 70th anniversary. I think that we have to acknowledge that the Academy has contributed to better understand the dynamics of our societies through its very qualified analysis and dialogue platform. So congratulations, happy birthday. And today I would like to address, or rather briefly mention, three headlines to start the conversation. And number one, why multilateralism is vital to solve current crisis. Second, the role of civil society as a key contributor to strengthen and re-energize the multilateral system. And third, the irreplaceable role of states and local governments in shaping a new multilateral system, multilateralism that I call a 2.0 multilateralism. Number one, multilateral diplomacy is the only option for humanity to address and solve its challenges. In 75 years of history, there have been so many changes in geopolitics, technology, security, development, and the multiple crises that humanity faces, such as climate change, environmental depletion, the arms race, financial volatility, rising levels of poverty, etc., violence, etc., etc. I think that is affecting people's lives everywhere, and they do not respect borders. Go-it-alone responses simply do not work. We have seen it so clearly with the COVID-19 pandemic. I think it has been not only a test, a harsh test for multilateralism, but a vivid example of the ineffectiveness of nationalist strategies. So in consequence, I believe that the international architecture has become increasingly complex, diverse, interconnected. Global governance depend on sometimes conflicting agendas and interests, not only among countries, but with local governments, international organizations, the private sector, civil society, in its diversity, of course, with different levels of representation and influence. We have heard that from the two previous speakers. And then what is the role of civil society? I think that during the commemoration of the 75 years of the UN, this was an opportunity to unleash a very intense, dynamic, creative, global conversation about the future of the organization. 1.5 million citizens responded to a survey, and the ample majority coincided in saying that the UN has undoubtedly made the world a better place, while at the same time acknowledging that it needs a profound retooling, a rejuvenation to respond to the current challenges. And of course, one of the key issues was the need for a more inclusive, democratic, accountable, and effective multilateral system. One of the outcomes of UN 75 process was a huge traction, societal ownership, engagement with ideas, proposals for the future of the UN. Thousands of NGO coalitions, such as the UN 2020 Coalition for the UN and the UN We Want, the Global Governance Forum, academia, the private sector, came together to discuss and propose creative ideas. For example, the coalition of UN We Want produced UN 75 People's Declaration and Plan of Action. There are proposals on the table to create a UN Parliamentary Assembly, a Peace Building Council, a Global Resilience Council. There is a lot on the table. And the question is, what comes next? And allow me just to close by posing some questions. Why is the voice and agency of civil society so important for multilateralism? But of course, we cannot escape from potential conflicts of interest here. And yet civil society organizations are information providers, awareness raising on machines, on key issues such as climate. They perform oversight, accountability. They have closer connection with communities and citizens. They contribute in a way to equalize power, to democratize the system, as we have heard. And the second question is how to ensure that participation of civil society has built-in mechanisms that are predictable, transparent, part of the global governance architecture, and not a case-by-case decision. And I have experienced that as president of the General Assembly. I think this is one of the key imperatives of the retooling of the United Nations. The Secretary General speaking about a networked multilateralism. And there are countless examples of the fruits of the influence of civil society in advancing the multilateral agenda. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which entered into force very recently, was promoted by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. The Women, Peace and Security Agenda was agreed in Beijing, and then Resolution 1325 on women was one of the crowning achievements of the global women's movement. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, after more than 10 years of negotiations with indigenous peoples. And here my last point, David. What is the role of states, of member states here? And I think the challenge to bring in more society, more with the peoples, without weakening the key role and responsibility of member states is central. So this leads us to ask the question, how to rethink intergovernmental processes and diplomacy as central to multilateralism. And here there's some key issues, such as the role of the private sector, which is an unresolved issue. The increasing importance of local governments as service providers, as policymakers, and also as democracy labs, I would call them. So in conclusion, I think that it is urgent that we reconnect the scales of political decision-making from local to global and vice versa. This local, I would say, as structure requires the voice and agency from civil society. I hear the Together First idea of having an AGO, a contact person, etc., several ideas on the table, but it is urgent to listen to the voices and expectations of citizens, reconnect communities of practice with communities of knowledge, decision makers with information and analysis, and science with policy and politics. And we have seen the importance, for example, of science diplomacy. So in short, we need to craft a new culture of multilateralism that is inclusive, that is networked, and that responds to the needs of people and the planet, and that is accountable and delivers. These are nice words, but we do have a golden opportunity of raising the voice of civil society. And this is the Secretary General report to member states that is going to come out this September on the future of the UN and the so-called common agenda. The voice of civil society in shaping this new common agenda, it's critical. And I would leave some more comments for the second round. Thank you, David, and back to you.
Thank you very much. Madam President, I cut a little bit more injury time for you, given a number of reasons, but also that you are, as a panel member, you are the only one who is saving our panel and giving us gender balance. But also, you understand the difficulty of president, and I must say you spoke for 7 minutes and 59 seconds. So I would like everybody to know that I will not be as lenient. The next one in line is Alyn WARE. Alyn is a very well-known figure in the world of NGOs, especially dealing with disarmament. And he has his hands full with the CD, which is probably one of the remaining intergovernmental organizations that does not have a formal docking mechanism with civil society. Alyn, without further ado on my part, please, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you very much, David. A happy birthday to the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, and commendations to the Academy for bringing together so many experienced people. And I hope also that there's going to be more youth coming into the association as well. And I know that World Future Day coming up on March 1st, there's a big focus on youth voice there. So I know there's openings for that as well. I'm going to focus in my comments on the array of opportunities there already is and are for civil society to be effectively engaged in the UN and make a difference. And really the problems that I see are primarily that people don't know enough about that we don't have enough education in our schools, we don't have enough media attention to the opportunities that are there already for civil society to be engaged. And I'm really happy to come following Maria Espinosa, because as president of the UN General Assembly, and even before that, when she was ambassador, she was one of the champions of engaging civil society in UN processes, whether that's in cooperation with like-minded governments or in cooperation with UN programs and UN offices. These are a couple of the examples of ways to be engaged. And I've had that experience of being able to be engaged in dialogue that's had an impact on the UN Security Council, for example. We were very engaged with Costa Rica, who brought forward, the dialogue on implementation of Article 26 of the UN Charter, which is the article which requires disarmament to help sustainable development. And we've been involved in other issues, bringing issues to the Security Council. I've been involved in initiatives in the UN General Assembly, including working on draft resolutions that have been adopted. I've worked on cases in the International Court of Justice, including the 1996 advisory opinion on the illegality of the threat or use of nuclear weapons. I've been engaged also in the Human Rights Committee. We're taking submissions now to the Human Rights Committee on General Comment 36 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is that nuclear weapons violate the right to life. These are just a few examples of mechanisms which are open to civil society engagement if you know how to become engaged. And as I mentioned, there are ways of doing that. It can be done directly with our representatives as citizens. The UN starts we the peoples, but of course those that have the voting power are the governments. So we can engage directly with our government representatives. But there are also UN meetings where civil societies can get engaged directly without having to go specifically through their government representatives. And in those meetings, we can even challenge our governments. We don't have to always agree with our governments on these issues. We can put forward new ideas, they can get picked up. And we can work in cooperation. That's where the NGOs are so important. Non-government organizations are helping to build cooperation amongst civil society to help us be more effectively engaged in the different UN bodies. And we can be engaged with parliamentarians. And while I see that there is a need for like a direct, parliamentary assembly, that would be very helpful, we already have an incredible parliamentary organization that has an official role with the United Nations. That's the Interparliamentary Union. 178 parliaments are members of it, and it is focusing directly on UN goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Peace and Security Goals, and the Interparliamentary Union is helping to bring cooperation amongst parliaments to effectively implement the UN goals and the role that parliamentarians can play. So we as civil society can engage with our parliamentarians either directly through our own parliamentarians and our own parliaments, or through parliamentary organizations like the Interparliamentary Union, or specific issue parliamentary groups like the one I run, which is Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament. And we have a very active program with the UN Office of Disarmed Affairs, taking forward the UN Secretary General's disarmed agenda. So those are just a few. I could go on for like half an hour, but all the different opportunities that people have. As I said, we don't have the time for that. The problem is not enough people know about it. United Nations associations are doing a good job of doing model UNs to help young people get the experience of how to get involved, but we need more in our education systems. We need the UN in particular as part of the curriculum of all schools and all education systems in the world. And we need media to pay more attention to the UN. Too often they will criticize when they see something wrong, but they won't highlight the positives that are happening with the UN enough. And we need to encourage them to do more of that. With that, I think that we can enhance and support civil society engagement and help make it more effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyn. Almost 5 minutes, but okay, thank you. It was a good sort of cue for our next speaker, Ambassador Tibor TÓTH, former permanent representative of Hungary in Geneva, and now Executive Secretary Emeritus of the CTBTO, an organization which he ran with distinction for a number of years. And I'm very, very pleased to see you and give you the screen. Thank you, Tibor.
Thank you, David. Nice to see and to listen to so many friends and colleagues. Your 3 points. What can member states do? What can organizations? And what can civil society organizations? I have good news and bad news. The good news, individually and collectively, they can do a lot. Member states, they can open up the system of both codification and implementation fora and IGOs, not just like now at the general plenary level, but where the real substance is shared, the subsidiary bodies, technical bodies, working group, and technical expert bodies. Secretariats of organizations, they should not abdicate from the doable. They should not hide behind member states. They should share the shareable, be a sharing organization, use civil society as a force multiplier. Since they are short of resources, especially in these COVID-19 times, they can use civil society as a force multiplier through in-house science and technology fora, foresight and future exercises, education and knowledge sharing, both formal and informal, novel forms of telework, where there is a new cohort of civil society involved. Secretariats could rely on civil society organizations in no-go areas, relevant for them, but they cannot easily enter because of a lack of mandate, technical or political. Civil society organizations should be, of course, smart, but be more agile and innovative in entering the spheres of member states, IGOs, and their secretariats, through political parties, parliaments, and lobby entities, even more descending from above, not just climbing upwards. In general, flood the system in a positive way, with ideas, with initiatives, with experts, with influencers, with public attention. A few words about the bad news. With all that, still we are utterly unprepared for what, as one of the futures, is ahead of us. A change of age, in my judgment. The kind of change of age that has been happening in modern history only each 4 or 5 generations. That is 121 is 30 years more or less. With the sea change passage that has historically been the most dangerous and perilous journey mankind can undertake, potentially taking not years, but decades, the passage itself. The last similar change of age happened the late 19th, mid-20th century, 1914, 1945. The previous one in the late 18th, mid-19th century, 1789, 1848. I hope those bracketed periods define what was behind us. Periods of war, civil war, revolutions, uprising, and other major calamities. David, hopefully later, if you give me the floor, I can be a bit more optimistic about the bad news. Thank you.
Tibor, thank you very much. That was excellent and very consonant with something that I recently wrote about the international scene. But we'll get back to that. Now our next speaker and last speaker for this round, first round, is Mr. Carlos ALVAREZ-PEREIRA, an entrepreneur, strategic advisor, as well as founder and CEO of the INENAXIS Research Institute on the crossroads of technological innovation, social science, and humanities. And I, for one, am very, very curious, as I know all of us are, to hear your views on this, sir. The screen is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I'm also speaking here as member of the executive committee of the Club of Rome and fellow of WAAS, as you said. I'm co-leading the club 2 initiatives, one on emerging new civilizations, what can emerge from the present emergencies, and also the youth and intergenerational dialogues. So I agree with Tibor that the future is unknown. I wouldn't agree with him that this is bad news, but we have to build on that, on the fact that the future is really unknown. So in my view, the role of the Club of Rome in particular, WAAS to a large extent, but I cannot speak on behalf of all CSOs, is to ask better questions. That's what the club has been doing for many years, and getting us out of the scripts. I think we should stop pretending that we have the recipes for the future. This is very natural, but this is not consistent. We recognize the size and the complexity of the challenges, and a second later we would like to have the solutions, the linear pathways to a desirable future. It doesn't work that way. Complex systems do not change that way. They learn new patterns, and for the moment we don't know what those patterns will be. So this is more an exercise of exploration in which definitely the Club of Rome, I think CSOs can play the role with multilateral institutions to open the scripts and explore together. And in particular, abandon the script of reductionism, that of splitting everything and wholes into pieces and just look at the pieces, because this is not the way we will find out the answers to what we need. I would also say I'm very skeptical about the value of the paradigm of stakeholders in the present state. Maybe in different periods of time, it could be useful, but now all stakes are questioned. And I see a difficulty in reaching collaboration, deep collaboration between people around the table, each of them designating themselves as stakeholders, holding stakes. This is not the moment to look at the past of stakes. It's the moment at creating a new future by learning. We see this as a gigantic exercise of learning, in which, just to give an example, and I will stop here, we have to consider climate change is a consequence of fossil fuels, hence we have to abandon fossil fuels, but this is not an issue of technical shift from fossil to renewables. This is an issue of how do we find the way to combine well-being, human well-being, and the balance between the biosphere that we need. And we know that what drives well-being is not the consumption of fossil fuels or other fuels, it's the quality of our relationships with others, other human beings, with all living beings, and with time. This is a completely different question from shifting from fossils to renewables. And I stop here for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. That's brilliant. Thank you. And we have actually exactly 21 minutes left. So I would like to ask everybody to give the good news or the bad news, but in telegraphies. This way, you can make the calculation. We have precisely 3 minutes per person, even without my pontificating and introduction. So let's, I'll go quickly. We go with Liberato, please.
Thank you, David. I think what NGOs can do and what they are ready to offer is less of a concern than what Alyn reminded us, and Andreas, the shrinking of democratic discourse in the locales where NGOs operate in their countries, and also at the United Nations, where there is increasing restriction of access. I think that the consultative relation and the work of NGOs work best and productive and beneficial when NGO access is valued and more frequent, when the modalities and mechanisms are predictable and consistent across the UN system, and that these modalities and mechanisms are transparent and accountable. And I think President ESPINOSA has underscored the importance of the consistency, because the worst that could happen is an NGO leader coming from a certain country first time and may never come to the UN again. They arrive at the UN and said, I'm sorry, we've restricted to 2 speakers, even if there are 10,000 NGOs that have landed in New York, Geneva, Vienna, or elsewhere. I think, so the expertise is not under question. It's welling up. What is not welling up are the opening of the premises and the political access to the decision making, to the decision makers.
Thank you very much. Well, access we open because we are the landlords at the UNOG, for example, but the access to the speakers is the secretariat of the meeting that is in question. And you know, I don't want to take up your time, but there was something very important that Andreas raised, which among other important things, but the fact that he compared the NGO committee and the Human Rights Council, and that we need to have people in the NGO committee who care about NGOs and want the NGOs there, same as people in the Human Rights Council who care about. But both are run by the intergovernmental process through the regional groups, the selections. How do we do this? Maybe in your next round, Maria or somebody wants to come up with some bright ideas on how do we affect that particular conundrum. Thank you. So we now move to Andreas, please.
Thank you, David. I think this is really the key question that you've been raising. What about the geopolitical groups and rotation system in the UN. And perhaps it is time, given the fact that there is so much dissatisfaction with backtracking at the Human Rights Council and also the NGO committee, to put that in question to a degree. And I think that is worth discussion. I also wanted to note that it is good to acknowledge, like Alyn Ware did, the existing mechanisms of participation that exist. At the same time, I think we also need to acknowledge that many of those who operate in the system are extremely dissatisfied how this is functioning. I think we cannot brush that aside, and this includes the parliamentary dimension that has been mentioned by Maria Espinosa, the proposal of UN Parliamentary Assembly, and by Alyn Ware too. My organization is running the campaign for UN Parliamentary Assembly, in fact, and many dozens of very experienced, high-profile legislators are actually turning to the campaign because they do not find that the existing mechanisms that they have through the IPU and other groups are sufficient to actually be formally involved at the UN. And the same applies to civil society organizations that are so experienced, like Civicus and others. Maria Espinosa mentioned the UN 75 People's Declaration that includes a whole, plethora of good proposals. And I mean, a lot of thinking and deliberation has gone into that. And I believe it would be really good to not continue seeking ideas, but perhaps start pushing for those that have already come to the surface, two of which I mentioned in the beginning, and one of the other ones came up later, the UN Parliamentary Assembly, the Civil Society Envoy, and the World Citizens Initiative. That's the three I think should be high on the agenda right now.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Thank you. Madam President, back to you.
Number one, I would like to strongly support what Alyn Ware said regarding education, regarding committing society to have a voice at the UN, in multilateral fora, not only the UN, but beyond in regional organizations. And I am very worried about indifference. And I think that one of the key challenges we face is to fight citizens' indifference towards, political spaces and decision-making. And I'm saying this because I recently looked at the Edelman value survey of 2020, and we see that 13% of citizens worldwide trust political parties, and less than half trust parliaments, and there is a major trust deficit worldwide. And I think that that's where civil society, the work of NGOs come to play. So number one, education. Number two, Liberato was very clear, we do need built-in, predictable, consistent mechanisms. It cannot be a case by case. It depends on the secretariat of a meeting, etc., etc. I think it is good for everybody to have clear rules, to know how it's going to work. And of course, you have always the challenge of the tyranny of time and the complexity of issues. Civil society is not a monolithic entity. It is so diverse, it expresses so many different interests, but I think that we have to do the homework. And the right moment and the space to do the homework is this effort of the common agenda, the new common agenda, which is an outcome of the UN 75th anniversary process. And not only the civil society declaration and plan of action, but the UN 75 political declaration that provides, I think, oxygen, the space for creativity. So we need to go and do our homework. This is a challenge of co-creation. There is, I think, a space to do it, and I very much look forward to be engaged, to have a conversation, and to support the Office of the Secretary General, who is putting all of this together. Thank you, and back to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Maria. Brilliant. You came under the 3 minutes. Thank you. Alyn, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. So I'll mention 3 good points, 1 negative and 1 solution. 3 good points. I see that we have a much increased capacity for communication and cooperation, and part of that was actually forced on us by the pandemic. I mean, what we're doing today, you know, the Zoom conferencing, people have got so much better at being able to connect with each other without having to hurt the climate by traveling to the conferences. And it's also been able to bring in more voices, because for the physical conferences, only those who can afford the time and the money to get there are able to participate. So this has been, I think, an incredible development, our increased capacity for communication and cooperation through that. A second thing, I think, and again, the pandemic has helped push this along. I mean, the pandemic had negative things, but some positive things, is an increased understanding of human security and common security, and the problems of relying on military and confrontational security. You know, the militaries of the world couldn't stop this virus from spreading around the world, and the resources which have been put into the militaries are like useless for addressing, you know, the health and the economic outcomes, and people understand this so much more. So a third point, I think, is the increased capacity we have to make the transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to renewable-based economy and a sustainable economy. We have the technical capacity to do it now. There's much better transition processes, so I think that's possible. The big problem I see is the erosion of scientific reliance on scientific and evidence-based thinking and discussion in political realms. You know, the rise of fake news, emotionalism, nationalism has been eroding that. So we need to help get back to evidence-based thinking and discussion. And for all of those, the 3 positives and the negative, education is a key. Education about what opportunities we have and how we can make a difference and how we can build back better from the pandemic for a sustainable world, and education about the problems of based on nationalistic ideologies and not looking at scientific and evidence for claims that are made in the political circles. Thank you.
Alyn, thank you very much. Excellent points. On your first point about enhanced communications, absolutely. But I got to tell you, I admit I miss a good packed airport. Tibor, over to you, please.
Yes, just to spend a bit more time on the more optimistic points about the bad news.
Yeah, you promised us some good news.
Yes. I think the good news is too big to fail. So hopefully we all understand that what might be ahead of us or what might be ongoing, this change of age passage, this journey is something which we will have to take very, very seriously. The big question is whether with 2 big clusters of wicked problems, number 1, climate change, number 2, implementation of the SDG in a post-COVID-19 situation, can we add more in terms of how civil society can support awareness raising about the perils, potential perils of this change of age? And I think the optimists should emerge, number 1, the most networked generation we have ever had. For reasons Alyn identified, communication is growing exponentially. In addition to that, embedding in education all these issues in a situation of unemployment and situation of despair for the younger generation, these are all potential force multipliers. Where I see the first level of challenge is we are speaking about the preserved existence of the IGO system of codification and implementation. I don't think that with one change in one country, the situation will quickly improve. The IGOs and the FWAAS are a linchpin between member states and between civil society. So we have to make sure that in the periods ahead of us, those IGOs are not so-called nationalized. They are not falling apart into 190 pieces. that they remain meritocracy-based. Why? Because only with the so-called Swiss Guard, we can preserve the integrity of the IGOs and their mandate. So the complexity is how to focus on this change of age challenge while not dropping the balls on the two other huge wicked problems.
Thank you so much, Tibor. Thank you. Now we go to Carlos, please.
So I would say the good news is that complexity is not a problem. It's not something we have to simplify and we have to eliminate. It's not an issue, it's the foundation of life. Complexity is interdependencies, and it is thanks to that life has evolved on Earth. That's the good news. The bad news is that we, for a couple of centuries now, we have been thinking in ways which are far from that reality, from how nature works. And that framework, that paradigm of thinking based on rationalism and reductionism, objectivity, and all that, has been useful for certain purposes, but it is not useful at all to understand a little bit better life and to ride the wave. So it is urgent that we change our ways of thinking and attune more to how life works. And the big issue is the later we do that, the worse. And Maria ESPINOSA pointed rightly to the issue of trust deficit. I think that deficit comes from the fact that people are living in the territories which are in real life, which is much richer than we can describe with any maps. And we are living, and multilateral institutions, myself, experts, we are living in the maps. And the maps are not the territories. The good news, just to finish with that, is that we know how to create conversations, richer conversations, involving people as people. So leaving our roles in the cloakroom and our scripts of what we think we know, but actually we don't know, or a lot of what we know we haven't learned, because learning is different from knowing. And we can engage with people of all kinds in conversations which will lead to richer, which will lead to the emergence of new responses. We are doing that in the Club of Rome in collaboration with the International Bateson Institute, using formats called warm data labs and people need people. I'm not saying this is the solution, but this is a way of initiating the kind of conversations we need to get out of this idea that complexity is bad, and to get into the point of complexity is life, and life is good, and life will provide responses. Thank you.
Carlos, thank you very much. Thank you. It's been such a rich discussion. I'm not even going to attempt to kind of do an aggregation of the ideas, because it's going to take us at least another hour, at least take me. We have Rapporteur Lidiya Grigoreva from our office, who will pull these things together and report at the end of the conference. But I just wanted to put this out there, and I don't know if any of you will be able to react to this. I don't want it to be a rhetorical question, but you know, in a world of the four horsemen that the Secretary General named last January, not last January, January 2020, of which totally bad relations among the most powerful countries. He didn't mention that the next stage down, we have absolutely unhinged regional countries or nations who do whatever they please without checking with anybody. We have the dark side of AI. We have the climate crisis, and we have a trust deficit at every level, top, bottom, sideways, inside countries, between countries. And the punchline is that in order to make somebody do something, you have to explain that it is in their interests. How do we explain to the stakeholders, as much as this is not a good word, as Carlos said, who are the member states, and where do we begin? To quote Andy Williams, where do I begin? Where do we begin to get people to understand that we need to do something? And what is that first something? Is that there? Anybody? Let's we have 2 minutes, so let's take 3 minutes of injury time.
I have a very quick response, and that is to remember that we are on this one planet together. And so the fate of each of us relies on the fate of all of us. We're like spaceship Earth. And to put that concept forward in everybody's minds, I think that helps us then realize that what we do for the planet, for the world, for peace, for common security, we do for ourselves.
Thank you.
I would provoke all of you by saying that, why don't we start recognizing that we are lost and building from that, you know? Because it's much worse to be lost and believe that we have a map to go forward than to be lost and recognize we are lost. You know, the speed, many times we hear we don't have time, there is no time left. Gandhi said many years ago that speed is irrelevant when you go in the wrong direction. So it's more important to build a new consciousness of what is the right or the wrong direction, even if that direction is not the one we had in mind. Sorry, that's where we are. So I would start by that.
Thank you very much.
Maybe the quick one.
Yes.
It would be good to mention here the collaboration between the Academy and CoNGO together with the UN Trust Fund on Human Security in a survey among NGOs what human security should look like and must take in terms of its forms. So I will put on the chat box the website of CoNGO, because that is where the survey on human security is lodged.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Maria, anything? Andres? Yes, Maria.
Well, no, I was just going to say that I think that we are living a unique moment of reinvention, of rebuilding. I think that the shock of the COVID pandemic has been, huge in all walks of life. Not only the way we communicate, the way we interact, the way we think, the way we consume, so many things have changed and have changed forever. And I think that I would support the idea of Carlos saying, we cannot go back to the same old. We are provided with the opportunity to collectively, to co-build, a better future. And I think that spaces for dialogue, for collective thinking, the role of WAAS is extremely important. Not only for participation of engagement of civil society in UN affairs, but I think broadly, more general, and the very concept of this moment of reinvention, of building back better and what it means, I think it's an opportunity that we cannot miss, and we have to be careful. Trillions of rescue packages worldwide. Lots and lots of money, but unfortunately we don't see clearly how is that these trillions are going to be invested to address critical issues such as inequalities in all its forms, to address the war industry and the weapon industry, Alyn. And I think it is a time for reflection, for creativity, for trust building, for remembering our humanity. And I think we should miss that.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you. Andres, very quickly, and then Tibor at the end.
Right, very quickly. I think we need to recognize that national sovereignty is one of the key issues we are dealing with. And that's an insight that was already very prominent at the foundation of the World Academy. In view of nuclear arms, obviously. And I think at this very basic level, we need to recognize that the so-called, the sovereign nation state is not the last word in the socio-political evolution of humanity. And we are, now in front of the challenge of making a leap to a truly global form of collaboration, which is clearly more than the assemblage of some nation states, a human society that is based on the concept of global citizenship and democracy.
Thank you very much. Tibor, the last word.
David, I think a key word for me is humility and soul searching. And we should start ourselves. If I might declare myself a member of the civil society, a concerned citizen, to start with ourselves. What are the issues or what are the layers of the society we left behind in light of where we are, not as of 2019-20, but 2021. And with this humility to do the type of soul searching, what do we have to do to change course? And we do not have to necessarily turn 180 degrees around. It might be enough as a function on each and every day to adjust by 1 millimeter with the humility of soul searching the course we have been following. And we have to check whether the notions of left behind and underprivileged, is it a changing notion? Do we have to look into our own backyard as we speak now, without forgetting, for example, the neighbors and the neighbors of the neighbors? So a lot of soul searching is needed. I think we have to keep the balls up in the air, but we have to, while we are doing it, to revisit the fundamentals in light of what I described as something which might be coming towards us once in 4 or 5 generations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm afraid I can't add any more injury time, but I think from what, especially, this last round, humility and looking at our situation, telling ourselves and sort of confessing that we are lost, and together thinking how to find ways to rebuild better, get out of this situation better, I think is the only way to go, especially since in a normal situation you would have need for some adult supervision. Unfortunately, those who would provide adult supervision themselves need adult supervision. So we have nobody to sort of rely on other than our own bootstraps and pull ourselves in the wider understanding. So I don't want to cut into our colleagues' time. Thank you very, very much. I am really always sorry when there is very little time to have a discussion, because this was not so much a discussion, it was an expression, and luckily we had time to express 2-3 rounds of brilliant ideas. We'll try to make something readable out of it and share with everybody. Thank you so much. See you in cyberspace, better still in person soon. Bye.